Western culture is extremely familiar with the concept of a witch hunt. It has been overused to the point of satire, but in the Middle Ages, witch hunts were no joke, and they targeted the least affluent in society. A scholar of witchcraft and history estimated that a single witch hunt in Germany claimed 900 victims. If you're not thinking about it, you might chalk this up to an ignorant society with a profound hatred of women and Jews. But you'd be wrong, and you'd be risking repeating this history again. People in medieval Europe were an extremely agrarian society. A couple of bad harvests was all it took for a community to literally starve to death. Listen to this quote from a 17th century historian. In the year 1626, on the 27th of May, the vineyards of the bishoprics of Bamberg and Würzburg in Franconia all froze over, as did the grain fields, which rotted in any case. Everything froze like never before remembered, causing great inflation. There followed a great lamentation and pleading among the common rabble, questioning why His princely grace delayed so long in punishing the sorcerers and witches who spoiled the crops since the beginning of the year. So these people weren't looking for trouble, they were responding to extraordinary events in their community that they didn't understand. In fact, when we look at a graph from a paper written by a Harvard scholar, we can see that bad weather directly correlates with witch hunts. And, in fact, you can find this phenomenon replicated throughout history on nearly every continent.
My name is Emma Mosswild. I'm a PhD student at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. I study climate change and agriculture in the early modern period. I focus mostly on the British Isles. If one resource is depleted, then another resource is going to be more depleted in order to make up for that shortage of grain or whatever staple we're talking about, which can then cause an ecological cascade of perhaps overhunting, overfishing, not allowing lands to lie fallow in between crop years, for example, which can then deplete nutrients in the soil.
And this wasn't just a bunch of people cooking up reasons to hunt witches. The temperature at this time really did drop by 2 degrees Fahrenheit on average from previous centuries. This caused a lot of chaos we'll get into in other videos. But right now, all you need to know is that Europe grew as a world power during the medieval warm period. This ended in the 1300s, during an event that came to be known as the Little Ice Age.
All of you!
Daddy, chill.
What the hell is even that?
No one is quite sure why the Northern Hemisphere decided to freeze, but scientists are pretty sure it wasn't just one thing. First, the world saw a lot more volcanic activity than it had in the past. This cooled the Earth as the sun's rays had a harder time getting to the ground. It's also possible that lower solar activity had something to do with it, since there seems to be a correlation between Earth's temperature and solar activity, but scientists aren't sure why that's the case, and so are unwilling to say for sure. And there's another theory. Remember, there were a few factors that worked together to completely change the weather in Europe. One of them might be on the opposite end of the world. During this time period, European explorers were very busy committing genocide in South America. Previously, the advanced Mexica society had kept thousands of acres of land under cultivation to feed its cities. Don't believe what Mel Gibson tells you, this was a society that prized organization and hierarchy. The Mexica Empire actually looked something more like this. As millions of people died of disease, overwork, and plain old murder, the lands they had previously cultivated were reclaimed by jungle. Okay, so I just want to take a moment here. Look at that. Look at that guy. He's so excited to be enslaved. As opposed to the actual Mexica, who literally tore down their own capital to resist the Spanish army. As this land turned back into jungle, South America became an enormous carbon sink. One team of scholars estimates that the 7 to 10 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere that was lost in that time, up to half of that is attributable to the genocide in the Americas. This rapid cooling was felt in the Northern Hemisphere, where Europeans with none of the political clout of a Spanish conquistador were unable to afford food because inflation was so high.
But there are other compounding factors that go into why that crop may have failed or why fewer people may have been able to access the food that they need. And then from there are, of course, compounding factors of gender, of class, of other social systems that can and should be linked to accusations of witchcraft in the 16th century, for example.
Keep in mind, the 7 to 10 parts per million of CO2 resulted in a temperature change of 2 degrees Fahrenheit. We rose that much on average last century.
All that land that's been reforested and basically just took up enough CO2 to, in present day terms, to basically mitigate 3 years of current CO2 increases.
We'll double that in the coming century unless Earth stops producing any CO2 completely by tomorrow. So what does that look like for us? That is for the next video.